The final warning, Ambassador Sarah Chen, stood before the massive holographic display in the United Earth Defense Council chambers, watching as the Corvan Empire's message played for the 7th time that morning. The alien emperor's voice echoed through the room with the arrogance of a species that had conquered half the galaxy without ever facing true resistance. Primitive inhabitants of the third planet. Emperor Thakshan's image sneered from the hologram, his 4 arms gesturing dismissively while his reptilian features showed nothing but contempt. Your pathetic world has exactly 72 hours to surrender all military assets and submit to imperial rule. Any resistance will result in the complete sterilization of your planet. This is not a negotiation. Sarah turned off the display and looked around the council chamber at the faces of Earth's leaders. President Martinez sat with his hands folded, his expression calm despite the magnitude of the threat. General Harrison reviewed tactical reports on his tablet, while Dr. Marcus Webb quietly observed from his position near the wall. The old scientist had been working on something called the Isolation Project for the past 15 years, but few people knew exactly what it involved. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sarah began, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment, "we have reached a point we all hoped would never come. The Corvan Empire has given us their final ultimatum, and they expect our unconditional surrender within 3 days." President Martinez looked up from his notes. "What are our diplomatic options?" "Ambassador." Sarah activated a smaller holographic display that showed the positions of various alien fleets throughout the galaxy. "Unfortunately, our options are extremely limited. The Empire has spent the last 50 years conquering every major civilization. In this sector, the Alvari Federation fell 6 months ago, and the Zentron Republic surrendered without a fight last week. We are essentially alone." Dr. Webb stepped forward from his position near the wall. His white hair and weathered face showed the signs of decades spent working on classified projects that most people would never understand. "Mr. President, if I may speak." "Of course, Doctor. What does your team recommend?" Webb activated his own holographic display, showing a complex 3-dimensional model of the solar system, surrounded by what appeared to be an intricate network of energy fields. "For the past 15 years, my team has been developing what we call the Isolation Protocol. It was designed as a last resort defense system for exactly this type of situation." General Harrison leaned forward with interest. "What kind of defense system, Doctor?" "The technical details are classified, but I can tell you that it involves quantum field manipulation on a scale never before attempted. If activated, it would create an impenetrable barrier around our entire solar system. Nothing would be able to enter or leave without our permission." Sarah studied the holographic model carefully. "What about the Empire's fleet? They have over 2,000 ships approaching our system." Webb smiled grimly. "That's exactly what we're counting on, Ambassador. The more ships they bring, the more effective our system becomes." President Martinez stood up and walked to the large window that showed Earth's blue marble hanging in space. "Doctor, are you telling us that we can actually defend ourselves against the most powerful empire in the galaxy?" "Mr. President, I'm telling you that we can do something far better than defend ourselves. We can trap their entire invasion force and cut them off from the rest of the empire permanently." The room fell silent as the implications of Webb's words sank in. Captain Alina Rodriguez, who had been listening quietly from her position at the communications console, finally spoke up. "Sir, if we're really going to do this, shouldn't we give them one final warning? Let them know what will happen if they cross our boundary." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. The captain is right. Even if we believe they won't listen, we need to make sure the historical record shows that we gave them every opportunity to avoid this conflict. President Martinez returned to his seat and looked around the room at each person present. Very well, Ambassador Chen, prepare a formal diplomatic message to Emperor Thaxian. Make it clear that any Imperial fleet entering our solar system will face consequences they cannot imagine. 2 hours later, Sarah stood in the communication center as technicians prepared to transmit Earth's final message to the Corvan Empire. The message would travel through quantum relay stations and reach the Imperial capital within minutes. She had spent her entire career trying to prevent exactly this kind of confrontation, but now it seemed unavoidable. This is Ambassador Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Council. Speaking directly to Emperor Thaxian of the Corvan Empire, she began, reading from the prepared statement while cameras recorded every word. Your Majesty, humanity formally requests that you reconsider your decision to invade our solar system. We have no desire for conflict with your people, but we possess defensive capabilities that will surprise your forces. She paused and looked directly into the camera. This is not an empty threat or a desperate bluff. This is a sincere warning given in good faith between civilized beings. We do not wish to harm your people or damage your ships. We simply want to remain free and govern ourselves as we have always done. The transmission was sent immediately, and within 30 minutes, the response came back from the Imperial capital. Emperor Thaxian appeared on the screen with the same arrogant expression he had shown before, but now his 4 eyes glowed with anger. Foolish humans, the Emperor roared, his voice echoing through the communication center. Your pathetic words amuse me greatly. We have conquered 1,000 worlds and destroyed countless species who thought they could resist our power. Your backward planet will fall within days, and your people will serve the Empire or die. There will be no negotiation and no mercy for those who defy Imperial will. Dr. Webb, who had been monitoring the exchange, stepped forward as the transmission ended. Mr. President, the Imperial fleet has just entered the outer edge of our solar system. They are approximately 6 hours away from our designated boundary line. President Martinez activated the emergency communication system that connected him to every government facility on Earth. This is President Martinez speaking to all defense installations. Operation Isolation is now active. All personnel should move to their assigned positions immediately. Across the planet, massive installations that have been disguised as research facilities and communication arrays began revealing their true purpose. Dr. Webb's team had spent 15 years building quantum field generators in secret locations. Around the world, the project had required the cooperation of every major nation and had cost more money than any previous human endeavor. Captain Rodriguez monitored the approaching Imperial fleet from the Space Defense Command Center buried deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. Mr. President, we have visual confirmation of the Corvan fleet. They have over 3,000 ships, including 12 of their super dreadnought-class vessels. Each of those ships is capable of destroying an entire continent. On the screen, the Imperial fleet moved through space like a massive cloud of death. Their ships were built for intimidation as much as warfare, with sharp angular designs and weapon arrays that glowed with deadly energy. Admiral Vex commanded the fleet from his flagship, confident that this would be another easy conquest for the Empire. Dr. Webb worked frantically at his control station, monitoring the quantum field generators as they powered up around the globe. All stations report ready, Mr. President. The isolation field can be activated at any time. Sarah watched the tactical display as the Imperial fleet approached the boundary line that Earth had established around the solar system. They're not slowing down, they're going to cross our line. Admiral Vex stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked at the small blue planet ahead. He had personally overseen the conquest of 47 worlds during his long career, and Earth appeared no different from any of the others. The humans had sent their pathetic warning, but now they would learn the price of defying Imperial will. All ships maintain attack formation. Vex ordered his fleet. Prepare for planetary bombardment once we reach optimal range. Dr. Webb watched his instruments as the first Imperial ships crossed the invisible boundary line that surrounded the solar system. Mr. President, they have entered our space. The field generators are responding automatically. Activate the isolation protocol. President Martinez ordered quietly. The space around the solar system suddenly filled with a shimmering barrier of quantum energy that was invisible to the naked eye, but impenetrable to any form of matter or energy. The Imperial fleet found themselves trapped within Earth's solar system, unable to communicate with their home worlds or escape back into open space. Admiral Vex stared in shock as his navigation systems went completely dead. What is happening? Why can't we contact the capital? His science officer worked frantically at his console, trying to understand what had occurred. Sir, we appear to be surrounded by some kind of energy field. Our faster-than-light communications are being blocked, and our engines cannot push us past the barrier. On Earth, Dr. Webb smiled as his instruments confirmed that the isolation field was working exactly as designed. Mr. President, the trap is complete. The entire Imperial fleet is now cut off from the rest of the galaxy. They cannot leave, they cannot call for help, and they cannot threaten any other worlds. President Martinez looked around the room at the faces of his advisors and saw a mixture of relief and amazement. How long can we maintain this field, Doctor? Indefinitely, sir. The field draws its power from the solar system's own gravitational and magnetic forces. As long as the sun continues to shine and the planets continue to orbit, the barrier will remain active. Captain Rodriguez received a priority message on her console and looked up with surprise. Mr. President, we're receiving surrender requests from over half the Imperial fleet. They're asking for terms. Emperor Thaxion sat on his crystal throne thousands of light years away, staring at the empty space where his communication array should have been receiving regular reports from Admiral Vex's fleet. 3 days had passed since the last transmission, and every attempt to contact the invasion force had failed completely. Your Majesty, his chief advisor, approached the throne with obvious fear in his voice. We have lost all contact with the fleet sent to conquer Earth. Our long-range sensors detect no trace of their ships anywhere in that sector of space. The Emperor felt a cold rage building in his chest. His most powerful fleet had simply vanished, along with his best admiral and most experienced commanders. The thought that primitive humans could have defeated the Empire's finest military force was impossible to accept. Asterisk. The galaxy learns news of the Corvan Empire's missing invasion fleet spread through the galaxy like wildfire, carried by independent traders and refugee ships fleeing Imperial territory. In the Outer Rim territories, species that had lived under Imperial rule for generations began to whisper about the small blue planet that had somehow made an entire armada disappear. Dr. Marcus Webb stood in his laboratory beneath the Swiss Alps, monitoring the quantum isolation field that continued to function perfectly after 2 weeks of operation. The massive screens around him showed energy readings from the barrier that surrounded the entire solar system, and every indicator confirmed that the Imperial fleet remained trapped within Earth's space. "Doctor, we're receiving another transmission." From Admiral Vex, his assistant announced from the communication station. "He's requesting a meeting with our leadership." Webb nodded and activated the holographic display. Admiral Vex appeared on the screen, but he looked very different from the confident commander who had led the invasion. His uniform was wrinkled, his face showed signs of stress, and his eyes held the defeated look of someone who had finally understood the hopelessness of his situation. "Humans of Earth," Vex began in a voice that was much quieter than before. "I am Admiral Vex of the Corvin Imperial Fleet. I formally request a meeting with your leadership to discuss terms for the safe return of my ships and crew to Imperial space." Dr. Webb smiled grimly as he prepared his response. "Admiral Vex, this is Dr. Marcus Webb of the Earth Defense Council. I appreciate your request, but I'm afraid you don't fully understand your situation. You and your fleet are not prisoners who can be released. You are permanent residents of our solar system." The Admiral's reptilian features showed confusion and growing panic. "What do you mean, permanent residents? The isolation field that surrounds this system cannot be turned off selectively. It's an all-or-nothing defense mechanism. If we lower the barrier to let you leave, we also open ourselves to future attacks from the Empire. Since your Emperor has made it clear that he intends to destroy our world, we cannot take that risk." President Martinez joined the conversation from his office in Geneva. "Admiral, we are not unreasonable people. Your crews will be treated well, and we can provide suitable planets within our system for you to establish colonies. But you will never return to Imperial space." Meanwhile, throughout the Corvin Empire, the disappearance of the invasion fleet was causing problems that Emperor Thaction had never anticipated. Species that had been conquered decades ago began questioning why they should continue paying tribute to an empire that could lose entire fleets to primitive worlds. On the mining world of Kepler-4, for to be enslaved, Althari people stopped working in the Imperial resource extraction facilities. Their leader, an elderly female named Zara, stood before the Imperial governor and delivered a message that would have been unthinkable just weeks before. "Governor Morix, the Althari people formally declare our independence from the Corvin Empire," Zara announced in front of a crowd of thousands. "If humans can defeat your greatest fleet, then perhaps your empire is not as invincible as we were told." Similar scenes were playing out on dozens of worlds as news of Earth's successful defense spread through unofficial channels. The Zentron Republic, which had surrendered without a fight just months before, began organizing resistance cells. The peaceful Moran species started refusing to pay imperial taxes, and even the militaristic Groks began questioning their loyalty to an empire that could lose entire fleets. Captain Elena Rodriguez coordinated Earth's response to the growing galactic crisis from her command center in the Colorado Mountains. Her screens showed intelligence reports from throughout the galaxy as species after species began rebelling against imperial rule. "Mr. President," she reported during the daily briefing, "we're receiving contact requests from 43 different alien civilizations. They want to know how Earth defeated the Empire, and many are asking for our help in their own independence movements." President Martinez studied the galactic map that showed the locations of various rebellions and resistance movements. "Captain, what's our assessment of the Empire's current military strength?" "Sir, according to our analysis of captured Imperial databases, the Empire has lost approximately 30% of their total fleet strength with the disappearance of Admiral Vex's armada. More importantly, their most experienced commanders, and advanced ships are now trapped in our solar system. Dr. Webb entered the briefing room carrying a tablet with the latest readings from the isolation field generators. Mr. President, I have some interesting news. The quantum barrier has been adapting and strengthening itself. It's now completely impervious to any known technology in the galaxy. Ambassador Sarah Chen, who had been monitoring diplomatic communications from alien species, looked up from her workstation. Sir, we've received a formal petition signed by representatives from over 200 worlds requesting that Earth establish a new galactic government to replace the Corvan Empire. The president sat back in his chair, overwhelmed by the implications of what was happening. Earth had gone from being an isolated world facing destruction to becoming the center of a revolution against imperial rule. Ladies and gentlemen, he said finally, it appears that our little defensive action has accidentally triggered the collapse of the largest empire in galactic history. On the imperial capital world of Corva Prime, Emperor Thaction paced through his crystal palace while reports of rebellions and military defeats poured in from every corner of his domain. His advisors cowered in corners, afraid to deliver more bad news about the rapidly deteriorating situation. Your Majesty, War Minister Grack approached the throne with obvious reluctance. We have lost contact with 17 more worlds in the past week. The rebellion is spreading faster than we can contain it. Thaction stopped pacing and turned to face his advisor with fury burning in his 4 eyes. How is this possible? We ruled the galaxy for over 1,000 years without facing serious resistance. Now, because of one primitive world, our entire empire is falling apart. Sir, it appears that our defeat at Earth has inspired other species to believe that the empire can be beaten. They are using simple tactics and primitive weapons, but they understand our weaknesses now. The Emperor activated a holographic display that showed the current state of his empire. Red markers indicated worlds in open rebellion, yellow showed areas of unrest, and green represented territories still under imperial control. The display was mostly red and yellow dot. Meanwhile, on the captured imperial ships within Earth's solar system, something unprecedented was happening. The crews of different alien species that had been forced to serve the Empire were beginning to talk to each other freely for the first time in their lives. Commander Ilix of the Zentron Republic met secretly with Captain Mora of the Alvari Federation in the cargo bay of Admiral Vex's flagship. Both officers had served the Empire reluctantly, knowing that resistance meant death for their families back home. Ilix, have you heard the reports from our home worlds? Mora whispered in the darkness. The Althari have declared independence, and your people are fighting imperial occupation forces. I've heard the rumors, Ilix replied carefully. But how can we be sure they're true? Dr. Webb had been monitoring these conversations through the translation systems he had installed on the captured ships. He decided it was time to let the alien crews know what was really happening in the galaxy. This is Dr. Webb speaking to all personnel aboard the captured Imperial vessels. His voice echoed through every ship in the trapped fleet. I want you to know that your home worlds are free. The Corvan Empire is collapsing, and your people no longer live under Imperial rule. The reaction was immediate and powerful. Throughout the fleet, alien crews who had been forced to serve the Empire began celebrating their unexpected freedom. Many requested permission to transmit messages to their home worlds, and Dr. Webb was happy to allow them to use Earth's communication systems. Admiral Vex watched helplessly as his multi-species fleet dissolved into a collection of independent groups, each more interested in contacting their home worlds than maintaining imperial discipline. The unity that had made the Empire's military so effective was disappearing as species after species remembered their own identities and loyalties. Captain Rodriguez received a priority transmission from the outer edge of the solar system, where Earth's sensor network monitored space for any signs of new threats. "Mr. President, we have 3 Imperial rescue fleets approaching our boundary. They appear to be attempting to break through the isolation field." The first rescue fleet consisted of 50 of the Empire's newest ships, equipped with experimental weapons designed to penetrate any known defensive system. They approached the shimmering barrier that surrounded Earth's solar system and began firing with every weapon they possessed. The quantum field absorbed every energy blast and kinetic projectile without showing any sign of weakening. After 6 hours of continuous bombardment, the rescue fleet retreated in defeat, their weapons exhausted and their crews demoralized. Emperor Thaxion watched the failure of the first rescue attempt from his throne room and felt despair creeping into his ancient heart. If his newest weapons could not break through Earth's defenses, then Admiral Vex and his fleet were truly lost forever. The second rescue fleet tried a different approach. They brought massive industrial equipment designed to physically disrupt the quantum field by creating gravitational distortions in space. The attempt backfired spectacularly when the isolation barrier reflected the gravitational waves back at the fleet, crushing half their ships and sending the survivors fleeing in panic. By the time the third rescue fleet approached Earth's boundary, the galaxy had learned that the human defensive system was absolutely impenetrable. The final attempt involved diplomatic ships carrying surrender offers and tribute payments, but Dr. Webb's response was simple and final. "The isolation of our solar system is permanent and non-negotiable. Any Imperial ship that approaches our boundary will be treated as a potential threat. The age of the Corvan Empire is over." Throughout the galaxy, the news that even rescue fleets could not penetrate Earth's defenses convinced the last holdout worlds to join the growing rebellion. The empire that had once controlled thousands of star systems was reduced to a handful of core worlds around the imperial capital. President Martinez addressed the United Nations General Assembly 6 months after the failed invasion, speaking to representatives not just from Earth's nations, but from dozens of alien species that had established diplomatic relations with humanity. "Ladies, gentlemen, and distinguished alien representatives," he began, "6 months ago, we faced the threat of total annihilation. Today, we find ourselves at the center of a new galactic community based on freedom and cooperation rather than conquest and oppression." Ambassador Sarah Chen stood beside him as he continued. "We did not set out to destroy an empire or liberate a galaxy. We simply wanted to protect our home and our way of life, but sometimes a single act of defiance can change the course of history." In the depths of space, the quantum isolation field continued to shimmer invisibly around Earth's solar system, a permanent reminder that some lines should never be crossed. The Corvan Empire had ignored Earth's warning and paid the ultimate price for their arrogance. Dr. Webb, now in his 70s, but still sharp as ever, monitored his creation from his laboratory and smiled. The isolation field had become more than just a defensive system. It had become a symbol of hope for oppressed species throughout the galaxy and proof that even the mightiest empires could fall when faced with determined resistance. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Earth's line was not to be crossed, and humanity's warning was never to be ignored again. Asterisk.